Adelaide Wenberg from Grafton, where I was born and where I was taken as a 4-year-old. There's 9 of us, and we're all taken. I can't remember my mother, but the strangest thing is I can remember going to that home. I can remember getting off that train, and then these 2 officers, they met us, and believe it or not, they led us to a horse and buggy. And we were told to climb aboard, and our legs were wrapped in a warm blanket, and it was frosty and it was cold. It was so still, the morning you could hear the horses' hooves, you know, clip-clop, there's echoing all the way. And so we go up this driveway, and there's these big pine trees, and I can always remember it, looking at them, it was windy. The pine trees are all bending over as if to welcome us. And I looked down, I looked at the ground, and it was covered in snow. So I thought it was only the marble from the quarry. And then we met the matron. It wasn't the matron Hiscock, it was matron Coltheart, the first matron we had there. And then she told us, she said, now girls, this is your new home. If you behave yourself, you'll be all right. And we clung to each other, Amy, Rita and I, not knowing what to expect. We were frightened. Oh yes, we had to work, but it was hard yakka. We had those old toilets. They took the lids off them, and there was a dunny man used to come out and empty the cans and replace them, and that, you know, and take it down to the sewage works and that. And we had to scrub that cement floor and those toilet seats. And then you had the turn of doing the floors and that. And then you had turns of peeling the veggies and getting the chooks in and cleaning up their mess. That was the weekend job. You had to clean the chook pen, and the chooks were allowed to run. And you scrubbed all that out, and then you had to, what all the muck they made, you had to collect all that and put it around the garden where the lilac trees were. They were beautiful trees then. I made a hammock for myself at Cootamundra, and I used to go up in that hammock after lunch of a Sunday. If we weren't going for the 10-mile hike, what the officers used to take us off to make us tired, I used to go up into that hammock. I used to take a book and I'd sit up there and read for hours. And the matron used to say, "Where's Adelaide? Where's Adelaide?" And I wouldn't say, no, I'd be lying up there to hear them, "Where are you, Adelaide?" They all knew where I were. The girls all knew. So we knew you were up there in that hammock. Another time I went up around, got this book. I ran up to get into my hammock I made. So proud of it, you know. It was peaceful, away from all the other girls. I just felt peace. I went to get into it, there's a bloody big sand goanna in it. Well, that was enough, I couldn't get out of there fast enough. And then I said, "Oh, you can have that, I'm not staying here, you can have it." So I let him have it. But, yeah, I built that for myself, to get away from everyone. And I was forever in trouble, ever. I was locked in the box room, in which I got out through the fan light, and I was sitting on the roof, and they all used to line up outside the dining room on this cement. And my sister Valerie spotted me. "Adelaide's up on the roof." I said, "That'll be right." And the matron came out, and it was matron Hiscock then. She said, "Get off that roof, you're going to get punished again." She said, "I don't know, I'm sick and tired of hitting you." And she said, "The girls are all going to the swimming pool, it was summer. Your punishment will be you won't be allowed to go down to the local pool." That was my punishment. And the next time I was locked in there, it was dark. And they took the light bulb out. I was petrified, absolutely petrified, because I know there was something in that box room, and I don't care what anyone says. And because a lot of Aboriginal people have that feeling, they know there's something there. And I kept kicking and kicking at the door and screaming till I made myself exhausted. I don't know how long I did it for, but it was about 7 o'clock at night in the dark. And I could hear the big girls saying, "Shut up, shut up, shut up," you know. And I heard my sister Amy saying, "Tell her to shut up once more and I'll get out. I'm ready for a fight." And she always used to stick up for us. Just one of those things. I don't know what it was, but I never liked being told what to do. And you had to do as you're told, or you got belted or the cane across the hand. And one day, a group of us girls went down to the orchard to get some fruit, and you weren't allowed down there to steal the fruit. We came back, we were eating the fruit and that, and one of the officers spotted us and they said, "You're going up to see the matron." So my sister Amy was with us and she said, "Before you go up there, get that tree up there and grab a couple of those leaves and rub your hand real tight because there was a resin and it put a barrier on your hand and you couldn't feel anything once you got the cane." So we all line up there and all the girls come out pretending to cry, because if you didn't cry, they knew there was something wrong. But me being a little smart ass, walked past. When I had my cane, I walked past and I said, "Didn't even hurt." And she said, "Right, miss, you'll get back here and we'll make sure it hurts. You'll bend over and you'll get it right across your backside." And it hurt. She left great welts on my bum. And when I went to bed that night, Sister Amy said, "Oh, you've got blood coming through your nightie." And when I had to get in the bath, it hurt, and she washed me there to make sure. Took a while to heal up, but it still got marks there and that. But she said, "Why didn't you cry? Why didn't you cry? Why do you have to be so stubborn?" I said, "I'm not going to let them know that they hurt me. There's no way I'll let them know." Another time, there were 6 at a table, and we all had our school uniforms on. The porridge comes out, eh? And I looked down. I was a very fussy eater. I looked down. I said, "Oh, look, there's bloody grubs in this porridge. I'm not eating it." And this officer, who was so cruel, she came from Parramatta Jail. They sent her up there to us, and we weren't criminals. We were kids taken away. Margaret Patton was sitting up there. She said, "Well, I'm not eating it even." And this officer comes around and she says, "You'll eat it or you'll wear it." And she said, "Well, I'm not eating it." And she wore it, tipped it over her head. So all us kids went real fast, worms and all. We didn't want it tipped over us. Well, I said to this officer, Healy, she said something to me. I said, "Oh, shut up. That's the last time you'll ever say that to me," she said. "I'll get you." Never thought anything of it. About a week later, she was on bath duty. And you go in 2 at a time. There's 2 baths and they call you in. Lorraine Darcy was in one and I was in the other. And she said, "Wenberg, you're next." And then I'll go in and strip off. And she's standing there with this cat of 9 tails. And next thing I know, I had my back to her, washing myself quite happily. And Lorraine Darcy yells out, "Watch out." She hit me across the back with the cat of 9 tails. I felt this burning right across me back. I didn't cry. I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. Anyhow, after that I got out and Betty said, "You got a terrible big mark across your back." She said, "We'll go down and get that stuff from the backyard there, one of the weeds we used to use, and rub it on you. It leaves it up," which they did. And every day I used to put that stuff on. This weed only grows in the spring, thank Christ for spring. And they got the sap out of it and put it on my back and healed it up real good. But that cat of 9 tails, that bloke down near the stockyards gave one of the officers that whip to keep us in hand. And that's what they used to use on the cattle, to get them into the different yards and that. And that's what happened to me and that. And when I went to Sydney, I couldn't understand why I was getting pains all the time. I was playing tennis and I used to double up with pain. And I went home to the lady I worked for. I said, "I don't know, I've got these terrible pains under here. So I'd send you to the doctor." Now, I went into hospital not knowing what was going to happen, not knowing. And after the operation, my brother said, "You nearly died, you know." I said, "Oh, well, I'm still here, aren't I?" Like that to him. He said, doctor came around. He said, he looked at my chart. He said, "Look, girlie, I'm going to ask you one simple question, and one simple question only. You can give me an answer or not. I'm not going to pressure you. That kidney was caused through trauma. Did you fall, or fall off a horse, fall down out of a tree?" That's what that bloody thing did, that whip. I didn't say nothing. I said, "No, I don't want to talk about it." They said, you'd have had a perfectly good kidney. Whatever happened, you should have still had a kidney. But he said, give you a word of advice. Will you look after that kidney? Every time you pass a tap, drink, draw it up, keep it flushed, and it'll look after you. And that's what I've done. Not bad for 77, eh? I loved school. I loved it with a deep passion. I did very well at school. And we're all sitting on the outside, the offices, where they had their meals, on the steps. And the matron said, oh, Adelaide's a very clever little girl. And one of the officers said, what's the point of her being clever? She's only going to be a domestic. And that stuck with me, and I never tried again, never. But when you were 15 or 14 and a half, you were made to leave because they saw you didn't have anything ahead, and except to be a domestic service. It's not the school, it was the board, the Aboriginal Welfare Board. They were the ones that didn't give us the opportunities. A lot of those girls were very clever. First farm I went to work on, the people were really nice, and I loved being there. He taught me to ride a horse and how to round up sheep and how to separate the cow from the calf so we'd have milk in the morning. And I did that, but he had a breakdown. And I remember as plain as daylight, the lady coming in and she's saying, Adelaide, get out of bed, quick. Mr. Koenig's going to kill us all. He's out there on the wood heap with an axe in his hand. Oh, okay. I wasn't scared of anything. I went out to him. I said, what's the matter, Mr. Koenig? He looked at me and he said, are you my father? I said, well, what a strange question to ask. But then his father and two brothers came and got him. The reason he had a breakdown, it was drought. His sheep were dying, his wheat crop died. He just couldn't cope. So I went back to the home. Then I was sent to this property out at Illabo. These dreadful people, dreadful. They used to make me go to church every Sunday. I hated church. I hated with such a loathing. And this particular day, I went to church with them in the little town called Bethungra. She said, get out and open the gate on the way home. I said, righto, we don't want the sheep getting out. Just open up the gates, she said. So I got out to open up the gates. The bitch tried to run me down. So I packed up my clothes. And when I ran away, they reported to the police at Bethungra. And this policeman had 8 kids. His name was Sergeant Keys. I'll never forget him. I will never forget this bloke. And he found me. They had this big searchlight. I was down near the dam and he found me. He said, come on, Adelaide, I'm going to take you back to Cootamundra Girls' Home. I said, good, it's better than being here. And on the way home, he stops around the corner before we go up the driveway to the home. And he says, I'll give you £2, £2 in those days. He had his bloody penis out. He said, if you touch this, I said, you touch me. I said, you get more than you bargained for. I said, I'll scream. I said, no. He said, don't tell anyone. He said, here's the £2. I don't want your bloody £2. Get me up to the home quick smart. Get up there, tell the matron. Didn't believe a thing I said. I sent out to Wallenbean, property called Killarney. But this particular day was shearing time. Mrs. Gardner said, take the morning tea down, Adelaide. Had this big basket. Don't go into the shed. It's bad luck. The shearers don't like you in the shed. Well, I never knew this. I said, okay, that's good. So I took her down. I said, Mr. Gardner, here's the morning tea for the shearers. And he said, oh, come on, Adelaide, come pull me up into the shearing shed. I said, I'm not supposed to be in here. And he said, oh, that's all right. Threw me on the bale of wool and put his hand up my skirt. There were 2 Aboriginal shearers there, and they stood up for me. If they hadn't have been there, God knows what would have happened, because they said, touch her, mate, you're in trouble. And he was frightened of them, and he let me go. Well, I ran away from there too. And then I was sent back to the home. My lucky break came. I was sent to the most beautiful woman. They wanted a girl from the home as the domestic at Double Bay. She was paralysed from the waist down, and her mother was in her 80s. And when she looked at me, she said, oh, they sent me a child. I must have looked so bloody young, I don't know. But I worked bloody hard there. And I used to, on the nurse's day off, I used to bath and wash her and put her back on the wheelchair, put her into the toilet. And then my mother died. And she said, we're moving away from here, Adelaide. We're going to buy a house at Rose Bay. We're going up class, you know. Oh, she's beautiful. She taught me how to read, how to pronounce words properly, how to behave like a lady, which is true. I used to go to the opera, used to go to the ballet. I love classical music. Don asked me how I managed to have a child, because in between having a boyfriend and working, looking after an invalid, and having a job on my day out, cleaning out units up at Rose Bay North, how did I manage to have that child? I would not know. Anyhow, I met this bloke, years older than me, years. He was the managing director of Sunbeams Electric. Years older. And I was going 26 when I had Robert. And when I told her I was pregnant, you know, I said, I'll leave if you like. She said, no, well, you won't. We'll bring him up together, which we did. And when she died, I'll never forget that funeral as long as I live. All her wealthy people came to it. They would get back to the wake. They're all in there feeding their faces and drinking up all this bloody alcohol, you know. All I wanted to do was go into my room and hide. I didn't want to talk to anybody. And they knocked on the door, Adelaide, you've got to come out. Tony Perry's reading the will. He was a barrister and was her nephew, and he was the mayor of Villara. He's reading the will. I'm not interested. I couldn't care less, I said. And that I just want to be left alone. But no, Tony came and come on, Adelaide, you've got to come out. There's three of us, the two twins and me. She left the house too. And most of the furniture was left to me. And the most beautiful cutlery set was left to me, and there was a fight over that. Beautiful pictures, Norman Lindsay painting, and they were fighting over it. And I said, look, I'm not in the mood for this. I said, all I want to do is be left alone. And they all left. But that night, I was sitting on the corner of the couch, and she used to sit on the corner next to me like that. And I looked around and I saw her. And she said, don't worry, everything's going to be all right. And then another woman bought the house. And I walked past that house. I went up there for Christmas to a friend's place at Rose Bay. And I walked past there and I saw two Siamese cats. I said, she's right now. She loved cats. That's how I looked at it. My father, yes, I knew my father because he, I didn't know this. When I got these papers, they said he wanted us back. And in the paper was, why can't I have my children back? The girls can sleep with their mother and the boys can sleep with me. And he pleaded with them to have us back. He had a house and he had a job. He was in the army, as a matter of fact. And they wouldn't let, he just pleaded with them and they wouldn't let him have us back. When we were all taken, he just took to drink. He just, you know, all his kids were gone, so what the hell? He had nothing to live for. And the first time I saw my father, he came up to the home. And in order to come up to the home, you had to have a letter from the Aboriginal Welfare Board to see your kids. He never had a letter, he just roamed in and he was drunk. My sister Amy said, hey, there's a bloke coming up the road here, up the drive. I think that's our father, Adelaide. And I said, I don't know, I can't know. I don't know. She said, yeah, that's our father. And the matron rang the police and they got him off the property because he was drunk and weren't allowed to come up there like that. And the next time I seen him, when I went to work at Sydney, and my brother took me over. I wasn't allowed out anywhere without my brother coming and get me. And I was going on 16. And he took me over to Hyde Park and he said, I want you to meet someone, Ed. And here's this chap with a bottle in a paper bag, handed from one bloke to the other. All these drunks on the seat in Hyde Park. And he said, that's your father. And he said, you watch, as soon as he sees us coming, he'll hand it to the other bloke, which he did. And he said, oh, this is your daughter. And he got a shock of his life. You know, he started crying. And he said he was sorry and all this. And Gus said, why should you be sorry? You didn't do anything to us. It was the welfare, not you. We were down at the Domain. They used to have, every Sunday, they had this soapbox thing. And all these people used to get up and preach. And there's this one old bloke. He used to stand up there as drunk as anything, preaching away to a song. Look at that old bugger, he doesn't know what he's saying. And Ed and the King, a couple of the girls from Cootamundra were there, we're all making joking. All of a sudden I heard this voice. What are you doing there? It was my father. He was drunk as a skunk, because, you know, he was an alcoholic by that time. And he said, get away. He tried to protect me. Even though he was drunk, he tried to protect me. He said, you don't hang around here. He was good in that way. He loved his kids. I will say that about him. But he just took the drink that all the kids were taking. He had nothing to live for. And when he got hit by a car in Sydney, he was in a coma for months and months. And I went to see him, and my aunt said to me, don't look. There's nothing of him. He's faded away to a shadow. Why do you think a lot of these young boys and the men and the fathers went to drink and died? Because they lost their kids, like my father. So he just threw in the towel. They weren't going to give his kids back. He asked for them back. So what? That was it. He just threw. And half these kids, I know all these kids that are coming through the great-great-grandkiddies, you take a look at them, it still has an effect on them because a lot of them have turned to grog. There's 2 young boys we buried a couple of weeks ago in their early 40s. Their grandfathers were stolen generations. And because they've seen their fathers and fathers so depressed, and all they got is that grog, and that's what they lean on. But I do look back with a lot of anger and think, why? That's how I look at it.